All right, Shauna, thanks for joining us today. It's a Friday. You were sick earlier in the week. You're feeling better. So it's good to be with you. Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Great to be with you this morning, Tom.
So let's start with just jumping right in here. You've been a CEO for 8 years now. You've lived in North Dakota, I think you said, Minnesota now, Washington, D.C., Michigan. You've been all over the place. And so tell us your sort of journey when it comes to life and to leadership.
Oh, wow. Great, great question. So I'll try to be succinct as much as I can. I really, I credit a big part to my mentor when I went to graduate school. From Minnesota, I've kind of done this full circle. I'm back in my hometown where I started, but I'm a social worker by degree, by trade. I say it's in my blood. My sister's a social worker, my aunt's a social worker, my mom's a addiction counselor. I've got nurses. So like this helping profession has been just part of who I am. And went to school for social work a little bit later in my life. I worked and said when I finished my bachelor's, let's move on. Let's go to grad school. I went to University of Michigan for my graduate program in social work, and it was there where I got exposed to who I call as my mentor, a friend, and did my internship. And when I was done with that internship, there was a employment opportunity for me that I jumped at that advantage. And through that experience, I was given a position actually that exposed me to so many different areas of the business. While I didn't have the oversight or responsibility for each one of these areas, and it was kind of it was a prepaid inpatient health plan in Michigan, carved out Medicaid behavioral health plan is kind of what we managed. So there were different departments, and I really was given a lot of trust, a lot of autonomy, given a lot of responsibility, but and collaboration and working with not only departments but different governmental entities, and that exposed me, I think, to so much that I use to this day, right? And in the course of that, I was exposed to some executive coaching. My mentor, who was the CEO at the time, she brought in an outside group, Brad, your counterpart, and at the time, to work with us to help design and develop what's our vision, our mission, our values. How do we instill coaching, leadership management, and coaching within our organization? That I was blown away, right? So that stood with me throughout my career. And then from there, with different transitions, I lost my job. They eliminated my position after some transition, totally in like, what do I do now? But it led to an opportunity for me to take those skills to the National Council for Behavioral Health Care in Washington, D.C. And that's where I worked for about a year before this opportunity for me to move back to my hometown as the CEO for a rural frontier mental health and substance use agency. So it's kind of where I'm at now.
Wow, that's a lot, and I love that at your heart, it sounds like is all about helping people, is all about being of service. And you
Yep.
also said that you had some mentors or mentor who really
Mm-hmm.
helped. And it's striking to me how many CEOs say that very thing, that there's a person or there's a few mentors in their life that really made a huge difference. So talk a little bit about the value of having a mentor in your life.
Um, She has been the person that, like, even when I took this job, right? So she kind of helped me get connected to the job at the National Council when I had that opportunity. And when this job opened up, I was like, am I ready? Like, do I even have what it takes? Do I have enough skills? And she's like, you've got that, kind of instilling that courage, like you've done all of this, right? And she's been that go-to person where when I question myself, like, do I need to, like, or what pitfalls am I not seeing that I might be stepping into, or where is my growth opportunity? And so it's not just validate and tell me I'm good, right? But tell me, okay, where do you think my challenges are going to be? And where do you think I might excel in this? And has been really helpful and gives me that other perspective, because your friends, right, are going to tell you what you want to hear. I love, you go to your friends, like, cheerlead me and yep, you're good, but I want to know what I don't know. What are the questions that I might not know that somebody else might know?
Yeah, which a really good mentor can do, because they're not there to they're there to encourage you, as you said, to put courage into you, but they're
Yeah,
not a cheerleader. They're doing their
yeah,
job. They're there to challenge you and to help you to
yeah,
grow.
yeah.
And you also said the same about my business partner Brad, and sort of his role as an executive coach and helping you guys shape your culture. And you said, I think your words were, I was blown away. What were you blown away by?
Well, one, at the opportunity is what I was blown away by. I came from a very rural, frontier area. It's hard, things trickle into the rural areas maybe a little slower. And just having that opportunity to get coaching. But it was also the self-assessment tools, helping figure out what are my blind spots. And then I know in your model, you talk a lot about the success strategy. And so I kind of carried that with me. It's like, okay, this has gotten me this far, right? And now what are the areas that I just, again, those blind spots, right? That we don't know. And it helped bring those forward for me at such an early developmental stage in my career that I don't think a lot of people get those opportunities. It's usually right waiting until you're in this C-suite, that you are you know at this executive level, and I was at that kind of mid-management level at the time. And I think that just helped grow and develop me and instilled some of that confidence that I can be in this position now. Doesn't mean that I still don't have challenges with those, the confidence at times, right? You got to have your own courage to step into that ring and deal with some of those issues. But it gave me I think a grounding in my career over the years.
Yeah, it's such a early informative stage that it sounds
Right.
like you've been all these, probably, what was that, 10, 20 years ago?
Yeah.
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 But here you are still talking about it. You mentioned what we call the default success strategy, this idea that we all have a default sort of way of doing things that we don't really even think about. It's like unconscious, it's like automatic, it just comes out of us, it just happens. And it's a great strength. It's what has made us successful in life.
Mm.
And it works great until it doesn't. It works great most of the time, and until it doesn't. I'm curious for you, how has that shown up in your life over the last maybe 10 years or so?
Well, I probably could say even over the last, couple years, where I think it's just my success strategy kind of hit a wall,
Mm.
in the sense of I've had so much exposure in this vision, right? And these big ideas, and I like to talk. And when I talk, I like to, like, oh, like, let's think about this, but it's moving this idea and into action, right? Or into a plan that doesn't overwhelm like my entire team. They're like, oh, here she goes again with another big idea. And, like they hate it when I go places because I come back, right, with a bunch of, oh, now we need to do this. Well, we are only so many people, right? And I want it all. My phrase, and I just met with my executive team this week, and I said, we're making some big decisions on some personnel decisions, and I'm like, I want my cake and I want to eat it too, right? And knowing how big is that piece of cake, right? It's not the whole cake, but it's maybe a small little slice, and helping manage that, because I love to vision and, boy, look at what we could do and where we can be and how we're going to serve people, and it's that servant leadership piece. It's like, look at all that we're going to be able to bring to our community and to people that don't have access to services. But yet when my team hears that, they get kind of like, oh, here she goes again. Now, where does this fit in our strategic plan for the year? And who's going to do this? And so my wall has been, I've got to really start getting more planful in the work that we're doing and resourcing appropriately, and then identifying we don't have all the resources, and starting to bring those in. So
Yeah.
see, it's a story. I like to talk a lot.
Well, it's a great realization that you've had over your career, that you think by speaking, and you are very visionary in nature. You're always looking to the next idea, the next new way of doing things, innovation. And the flip side of that is that it sometimes maybe leaves you without executing, without actually putting it into action. And so you've got to surround yourself with people, I would imagine, who can help you with that, who can make sure that the work gets done.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah. So how do you find those sorts of folks, or how do you surround yourself with a good team?
It's been defining clearly what are the goals, that we're trying to achieve, and who do we have within the organization, or we don't have, to help us achieve those. Are there skill sets, or is it developing skill sets? Do we have the time to develop that, or do we need to bring somebody in because we need to move on this sooner? And not even right now. That was a big part of our conversation this week is, boy, if we really invest in these positions, we will be able to achieve some of these goals faster than if we didn't. And then if we can achieve these faster, then we're going to be able to just kind of flywheel us into the future, and really achieve some of those other big goals for us. So, and it's been, and actually coming out of our meeting this week, it was a really great collaborative dialogue. Like we got like, okay, what are the pitfalls? What aren't we thinking about? Do we need to do we need this person or not? And it's creating that culture internally to create. And part of this is, we've just talked about this in the CEO coaching roundtable, right? This week is the psychological safety to co-create. And I was so validated in our conversation of creating that psychological safety to allow the diverse opinions at the table to make sure we're making the best decision. Because that's the other lesson learned, is knowing when do you need to kind of in that command control and make the decision, and when do you need to be collaborative in the co-creation around things. And this was one, we're all going to have to work with these positions. I wanted more consensus building around this versus just me saying, here, this is what we're going to do. And I loved the safe space that we were able to create with that at my executive level.
That's great. That's fantastic. You brought up the CEO roundtable that you're a part of, that we help facilitate once a month. Um, and not so much about that specific roundtable, but just what's the value that you see in getting together with other CEOs from, in this case, different industries across the country, in a regular way?
Oh, I find it invaluable because, for me personally, when you're in this position, and then for me as well, in such a remote area, there isn't another, agency, there aren't local groups, that come together where you're a CEO or you're in that executive director role and having to make really hard decisions. You're kind of alone, and you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants, and you're reading books and you're watching podcasts or listening to podcasts, or, you're trying to garner as much information, but you don't get the dialogue. And what I love is you can bring an issue to the table and you're getting this feedback, but you got to be open to it, right? You've got to be able to say, I don't know it all, and be vulnerable and put yourself out there, because you're going to grow and learn, and you're not alone.
Yeah,
And I find that so helpful.
you gotta just be open. I know we talk a lot about this idea of just what I call just being real, which is harder and harder in sort of this fast-paced world, and we kind of
Mhm.
grow up learning to put these different masks on and different shields on, and if we can just learn to be real, be open, it can feel vulnerable. To me, it's not about being vulnerable, it's about being open, and then sometimes that feels a little
Yeah.
bit vulnerable, but you can produce so much more when you just have real conversations with other people and let your guard down. That way you can, as you said, you can be open to the feedback, you can be open to the input. You don't have to accept it all, but at least if you listen to it, if you learn to just get it, then you can incorporate it into your thinking and say, yeah, that works for me, or that doesn't work for me. And obviously you've joined the group, what we call the interchange, for that reason. How do you on a sort of daily basis though, how do you foment that openness? How do you keep yourself open to input from other people in different areas of your life?
I'll say there's moments that are easier than others. When I get into my success strategy or I get into this, it's harder for me to be open. So I have to, what I really try to do is I go into every interaction, right? Whether it's a group meeting with multiple people or one-on-one with my direct reports. Um, and I strategically structure the agenda in a way for me to make sure that I'm hearing from other people, right? Like even yesterday, I was meeting with my CFO, and I, was asking, directly the question of what would make it safer in our conversations, right? To share a dissenting opinion, a different opinion. How do we? I want to make sure that we're creating that culture within the organization. Does it happen all the time? No, but then I loop back when I find that it doesn't happen. Right? I don't let it just not. I don't let it just now become a thing. I loop back with the person that maybe brought an opinion that they didn't share at the time when we were discussing something, for example, and to find out, like, how do we create that so you're comfortable to bring this forward in this meeting? And actually, I loved one of the quotes. I think it was you, Tom. That was it. Jack Welch. We're not going to approve something if it's unanimous. I need somebody to tell me why we shouldn't do it. I loved that. And I actually want to bring that something to that effect forward, because I don't want just groupthink. I don't want, because I'm sitting in this meeting, because I'm the CEO, okay, we're going to do it, right? That's not what this is about. In our organization, I want to make sure that we're doing things right. We're doing things as wholeheartedly as we can. within our organization. And, we got to check our boxes for regulatory and all that kind of stuff. But, if we can do that, we're free for everything else to be
Yeah.
as innovative and creative.
Yeah, yeah, and it gives your team permission. Not only permission, you're inviting it. You're asking for it. You're asking for different opinions, and that diversity of thought is so valuable because if you got four people in the room and they all agree, then you don't need three of the other people, right? It's-
Right, right. Yeah. And
um,
creating the culture that makes it okay. Because so we're still in developmental stages as an organization, right? That in developing our managers, that mid-level group, to make sure that they do feel it's safe to say what they need to say, because right now we still have moments where it's pretty silent, it's pretty quiet, and you bring something forward. So it's creating how to be creative in ways to ask your questions that makes it okay, that it generates those ideas. And that's something I'm learning still, because I open the question, okay, so what else do people have? um, well, that's not opening up creative juices. So I've got to start asking, questions in different ways that's going to spark that rich, robust dialogue.
yeah. Well, that's such a valuable lesson in that too for other leaders out there that are listening. That you don't get to blame your people when they're not being creative. You got to look at yourself and say, what am I doing that's contributing to this or not creating that safe space for people to speak into? Just asking a simple question like, what else is going on doesn't do it. You got to get more creative than that. You got to be more intentional about the structure and the questions you ask and the framework that people are speaking into and the time of day and all those sorts of things. I love that you're looking in the rear view or you're looking in your own mirror to see what can I do as a CEO to foment that innovation. So you mentioned culture, which we love to talk about. Obviously, the name of this podcast is Culture Eats Everything. So what's next for you guys? What do you see as sort of on the horizon in the future for the work that you want to do with your culture?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. It goes back to kind of my comment of wanting my cake and eat it too. We've been a very, I would say, grassroots organization, just started growing organically. And the world around the organization has changed, and has become so regulatory driven. And I think we're, being part of a healthcare industry, there's so much talk about um, how do you pay for healthcare and the responsibility of healthcare and being good stewards of public funds. And so there's this part of wanting to bring in the technology, the tools and the resources to really become, and this is part of a strategic goal for our organization, is to become a data driven organization. How do we use quantitative, qualitative data to tell us what we're doing, and then how do we do it, or where do we go potentially, right? And create internal processes. But at the same time, I don't want to lose the organic, flexible nature, right, of our agency. So when a client is in need, we know how to mobilize right away to meet the need of that client. I don't want people to feel like, oh my gosh, I got to go look at the spreadsheet and go look at the data. I don't want this clash of becoming so bureaucratic in becoming data driven to not meet the needs of the people that we serve, right? So it's this tension that we have as an organization. So it is creating, that's kind of this culture of, I want my cake and I want to eat it too, right? I want both. And so the culture is, we're working on blending, like where's the intersect that allows for us to be informed but still meet what we need to do with our clients, whether it's crisis, day-to-day routine services or emergent needs to meet people. So those are the active conversations we're having right now as an organization, and then bringing in resources to help us do both, right? We're hoping, we'll find out. I'm meeting with some folks here in the next couple days, and we'll keep my fingers crossed that they want to join our team, right? Is that I think we've got two candidates that know how to do this, right? That know really how to take that data, but then use it for transformational change. So it allows us to instill that culture into what we do. And then leadership, with my level, our board and our executive team, then driving these core initiatives across the agency.
That's so good, Shauna, because you're not just coming at it like a lot of organizations do. It's like, let's go do data. Let's go become sort of data-driven experts. You're looking at this and saying that's one component, but we've got to take a holistic approach. We've got to come at this from a leadership perspective, because if we don't lead, if we don't manage, if we don't coach, and we don't create the culture that will make the data work, then the data is useless. I've seen countless organizations fail at this because they don't do the necessary work when it comes to leading their people and getting people to see the value of doing this. Because if you don't, data can be really expensive to gather, and it can just sit there and waste a lot of time and energy, and people get frustrated because they're spending all this time gathering it and they don't know what to do with it. So I love that you've got this holistic approach that you're taking. It's unusual, unfortunately.
Well, and I think that's the right, as a leader, as a CEO, where you question yourself, right? And that's where the loneliness part comes in, is like, am I really off my rocker thinking about this? Or, because you can, like I said, read the books and, listen to a bunch of stuff. But when it comes down to actually practicing, and there's these images, right, that are portrayed, whether it's in media or it's in movies, or, all of that entertainment of, this is what a, CEO is supposed to be, and here's how you're supposed to do this, because, but it's like, I fight that, right? You fight what the image is supposed to be with what do you really want it to be? And it's choosing to go down that path of where do you want it to be, when it just sounds so completely out of the scope of everything that you've known, right? And that's the lonely part, when you don't have the folks to, bounce those kinds of ideas off of. And that's why I love coming together with the interchange, or I just had a call this morning with a bunch of CEOs of mental health agencies across the state. We get together at 8 a.m. Friday mornings, and it started out of COVID, but we've all found such value in it. Like, we just need a place to bounce. Like, what are you doing about this and that? That has been so invaluable.
Yeah, that's great. That is the antidote to our own sort of internal thinking, is to get out and talk to other leaders and to do a sanity check. So that's great that you're doing that on multiple fronts. Time is flying by here, so I just got one more question for you, which is, give us a book recommendation, or maybe a couple books that you would recommend for either personally, but for leadership, maybe for young leaders out there who want to become a CEO like you someday. What would you recommend that they read?
Well, my favorite, and I have it here, is, and I've mentioned this before, but Brene Brown's Dare to Lead. It's kind of my go-to flagged, questions. And I love when you use that term armor, right? She uses the armor a lot. What are we, and I whenever I hear that, I think of Iron Man, right? When he suits up and the armor just, comes up on his body, right? And like, I viscerally can feel that at times, right? In meetings, of being so in tune and in check to who I am and what am I feeling in certain circumstances, it helped me put the feeling to a word of, oh, my armor's going up here. Let me just breathe, right? Through it. Let me step into the courage to just ask the question that's different, right? And so much, we've got young leaders, new leaders, you're usually tapped into this because you've done really great work, right? You've shown that you've got a great idea, you get stuff done. And we are never going to be 100% perfect. We're never going to do it. And we're going to have the stories that we create in our head, right? What are those assumptions I'm creating? And so just constantly checking that and asking, what else am I missing? I think is going to be so important, and you'll go far. You don't have to wait for, dang near how many years later in your career. If you start thinking about it early and start with that kind of coaching kind of philosophy right at the beginning, you might not have as many headaches down the road.
Well, there's so much built into just the title, of dare to lead. If you think about that, right? Just having the courage to go try it, to go do it. That's really what it takes at the end of the day, is having the courage to see that fear. I don't know if I can do this, but go try it, go do it anyway. And I think that's such great advice in there.
So my favorite is, she's got this quote in the start of one of her chapters is, integrity is choosing courage over comfort. And I think about, as a leader, and the integrity that you want to have, right? Because your integrity brings credibility, it brings respect. And it doesn't mean people are going to always like you, right? They might not like your decisions, but if you have courage and step into those moments and be vulnerable and say, you know what, I don't have all the answers, and I know that these are going to be really hard. That's going to build my personal integrity, but it's going to build the respect of the rest of my team and the rest of my agency. And I have to say, it was because of this, even with COVID, we had to make some really hard decisions as an organization. We had to reduce workforce. We've had to, tell clients, that we're not going to be able to see them the way we've normally seen them. We've had to make some fast changes and moves, but I think we were able to do that as successfully because of stepping into that vulnerability and having that courage, and not just for me, but the rest of our team, stepping into that and helping convey and deliver the messages throughout the organization as well.
That's great. It's another example of you just being real. If you can just remember to be who you are, it's amazing how that pays off with a team and with a culture and with an organization. So, well, fantastic. Thank you so much for the time again, Shauna. We greatly appreciate it, and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.
I will, Tom. Good to be with you.